The Sword family's acknowledged waste awakens dark magic. Not only did he easily defeat his twin elder brothers in practice, but he also made a contract with the legendary undead warhorse. Even his sword saint father saw him as the family's heir, and bestowed upon him the demon-slaying divine sword used by the first generation. Yet before all this, he was a terminally ill patient with only 2.5 years to live. In his final days, he chose not to improve himself, instead spending his days and nights playing games to waste time. Since he had no relatives to contact after losing his memories, he could only wait for death's arrival in solitude. However, when he started his 28th playthrough, he gave his character both magic sensing and sword talent traits, but this choice came with the negative effect of terminal illness. Seeing this, the boy forced a smile and couldn't help but mock himself. Who would have thought that his final game before death would mirror his own ill-fated life? He then pressed the confirm button without hesitation. Suddenly, a dazzling blue light appeared. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in an environment both familiar yet strange, and the face reflected in the mirror was actually that of Nox, the game's most notorious spoiled young master. It turned out that the Linehaber family he was in was one of the 3 great dark houses. However, in this noble household known for producing sword prodigies, Nox, as the family's youngest son, was a talentless waste. The resentful Nox eventually chose to make a contract with a forbidden demon, becoming the most terrible disaster in the game. According to the game's main storyline, Nox's fate would only end in death. Now that he had soul transmigrated into Nox, he found it difficult to process. Just then the game's status window suddenly appeared, leaving Nox stunned, because this body possessed many negative traits, and his lifespan was also only 1 year. This reminded him of the game character he had just created. His thoughtless action had become reality, but before he could lament the unfairness of fate, an unread email suddenly popped up before his eyes. "Hello, Chenyu. No, I should call you Nox now." He looked at the scene before him in disbelief. The sender somehow knew his real-world name. Could this person know about his forgotten past? And the content that followed left him even more dumbfounded. "Although you might not remember me anymore, there's something I must tell you. It's been a long time. Welcome back here." Looking at the sender's message, Nox fell into deep thought. Could it be that the world I lived in before wasn't reality, but this is? Then the sender expressed their desire to help Nox, but to learn the truth, he must first enter Elidine Academy, build his own power base there, and try to recreate the game's main storyline. As soon as these words were spoken, the sender gradually disappeared. The sudden influx of information gave Nox a headache, but when he thought about how he had also lived under the constant fear of death before, the current situation was just a change of setting. Moreover, this was a game he had completed 27 times, so he secretly resolved to recover his lost memories, even if it meant becoming the world's most evil villain. And now there was 1 year left until Elidine Academy started, so it was time to begin the 28th playthrough. Then Nox pushed open the door and walked out of his room. However, a crisp sound of bone breaking was heard. He had accidentally triggered the negative trait of being sickly. This instantly broke Nox's defenses, making him wonder if his body was made of glass. And while he was troubled by this, a maid suddenly collided with him. The pain in his wrist immediately made him lose his will to live. But when Nox saw the maid's deep brown eyes and hair, he instantly recalled that this was Rona, the maid who spoke ill of Nox every day. Now that Rona realized she had bumped into the family's most spoiled young master, she immediately fell to her knees, constantly apologizing to Nox and begging for his forgiveness. Looking at her pure and harmless face, he guessed that she used this face to say bad things about him. Thinking this, Nox approached her with a mischievous smile. "I'll forgive you this time, but if there's a next time, I won't be so kind." Hearing this, Rona was so frightened that tears flowed like a waterfall, but she could only force a smile and promise it wouldn't happen again. Then Nox announced he was going to the training ground to learn swordsmanship. All the servants were stunned. They could hardly believe their ears. Was this really the notorious young Master Nox? Seeing everyone's reaction, Nox remained unfazed, instead smiling and asking Rona to lead him to the training ground. Hearing this, Rona immediately felt a bad premonition, wondering if he wanted to punish her in a place with no people around. After this small episode, they set off for the training ground. Now Nox needed to quickly adapt to his current situation. Because in this game with demons and gods as its backdrop, as a veteran player, he clearly knew all the hidden elements here. Players could develop characters through countless trait combinations. While characters could have multiple low-level traits like mediocrity, genius-level traits could only be assigned once. After all, genius traits allowed characters to easily reach the peak of their field. Although Nox assigned himself 2 genius traits at the start of the game, he paid a terrible price for this. The sword arts and combat genius traits he now possessed could let him easily reach the peak of martial arts. While the magic sensing genius trait could comprehensively improve magic usage efficiency, besides these, there were many other useful common traits. For example, insight allowed players to view other characters' status windows, while acting genius improved the character's performance ability. As for iron will, it could keep him calm during battle. But with these came many negative traits. Cold limbs meant he couldn't enter glacial regions without fire skills. Sickly meant the character would faint once every day, and the most serious was terminal illness. So to survive, Nox had to solve all these problems. The next thing to do was eliminate the weakening curse, as this negative trait halved his growth rate. So before training, he asked Rona to prepare several medicinal ingredients, but unexpectedly, this action made Rona think she was going to be punished again. This left Nox speechless. The spoiled young master setting really was despicable. Then he actively whispered something in Rona's ear, but after hearing it, Rona appeared shocked, asking why he would spend such a huge sum on useless trash. However, Nox didn't answer her question, just clenched his fist and threatened her to hurry and prepare. After Rona left, Nox began exercising in the training ground, but disappointment came quickly. Within just 2.5 seconds, he was already sweating profusely. Then he collapsed powerlessly on the ground. Who knew the weakening curse would make this body so frail? It seemed that before Rona prepared those items, he couldn't even run. At this time, Nox discovered that there were indeed many rare weapons displayed here after all. The Lienhaber family was known to the world as the House of Darkness and Swords, and this reputation was entirely due to their unique secret technique of infusing dark attributes into sword blades, as well as that divine weapon known as the Tyrannical Dark Sword. But none of this had anything to do with Nox, because the Tyrannical Dark Sword would only be passed to the new head of the Lienhaber family. However, being born into this family wasn't without its benefits. As one of the world's few prestigious families, no one would care how much Nox squandered the family fortune after all. His character's setting was that of a spoiled and useless noble youngest son, and just as he was troubled about why his ability values were so low, Butler Rodway unexpectedly appeared here. This made Nox quite nervous, because he was the current family head's most trusted minister, and also one of the most powerful people in this family. So he wasn't someone a spoiled young master like Nox could treat casually. Having such a thorny character appear at the start made Nox feel uneasy, but fortunately, he had the acting genius trait enhancement. This allowed him to avoid any mistakes in his conversation with Rodway. Rodway had come on the family head's orders to notify him about attending tonight's banquet, because the young lady of the Steeliner family was coming to study night courses, so the family head ordered everyone to attend. Hearing it was father's order, Nox had no choice but to agree at this time. Rodway also noticed his unusual behavior. Why would the young master who had always disliked swordsmanship suddenly come to the training ground? It seemed this matter needed to be reported to the family head. Meanwhile, Nox, who had returned to his room, finally relaxed his anxious mood. If his possession was exposed, it would likely cause unpredictable variables. However, what he cared about most now was the young lady of the Steeliner family, because in the story's finale, Nox, who had become a villain, was executed by her sword. But why would she suddenly appear at this juncture now? Soon night fell and Nox arrived at the banquet hall as promised. Sitting opposite him were his twin brothers Hartz and Alan. They were verbally humiliating Nox without any restraint. Only when family head Theodore appeared did everyone quiet down. Following closely was Miss Thalia of Steeliner. In the coming period, she would be staying with the Lienhaber family to receive night training. However, Nox appeared somewhat nervous at this moment. Facing this righteous character who would kill him in the future, he secretly resolved to avoid having too much involvement with her at all costs. As the banquet officially began, the family head decided to select candidates for Elidine Academy in the near future. It turned out that to limit nobles' power in the academy, each family could only get 3 admission tickets to Elidine Academy, and now the Lienhaber family's eldest son and second son had already used up 2 spots. So he planned to decide the final candidate through a family selection. Hearing this, Nox instantly became fully alert. Elidine Academy, as the most important place in this world, not only contained the vast majority of the game's plot, but also because the mysterious person had instructed him to recruit his companions there, so no matter what, Nox had to obtain admission qualification. However, according to the selection method proposed by the family head, he had to defeat his 2 brothers in a duel 1 month later. And now the twin brothers had already started celebrating their victory in advance after all. A weakling like Nox couldn't pose any threat. However, hearing their cold mockery, Nox calmly picked up his wine glass. These words should wait until after you've won to say. His calm demeanor quickly angered his 2 brothers, while the family head was also puzzled by his confident manner. But regardless, Nox's changes made him quite satisfied. Meanwhile, Thalia beside him also developed a strong interest in Nox. Her kind smile made Nox feel somewhat nervous. His flamboyant behavior seemed to have caused a huge trouble. After the banquet, Rodway reported Knox's recent unusual behavior to the family head. This made Theodore begin to suspect if Knox had been possessed by a demon. He then ordered Rodway to continue monitoring Knox, and in the following days, Knox's figure would always appear in the training ground. This made the maids very puzzled. He had to duel with his genius brothers in a month, so why was the young master just running continuously? Knox didn't care about these idle talks. He knew his biggest problem was insufficient stamina, because unlocking the sword genius trait required 4 points of stamina, generally speaking. Ordinary people would default to unlocking this trait, but due to Knox's weakening curse, his starting stamina was only a pitiful 2 points, and he had to increase his stamina value to a greater extent within a month. While in a state of halved growth rate, however, despite running so desperately, he had only increased by 0.1 from then until now. From this, he could deduce that the negative trait of terminal illness would also have his stamina growth rate, so he would need to put in 4 times the effort just to catch up with normal characters, and at this time, Rona had already prepared all the items Knox needed. At this point, Rona had already prepared all the items Knox needed, including Venom of Three-Headed Snake, Golem's Nucleus, Scroll of Rapid Stamina Growth, and Reminder Fairy Springwater. Seeing this, Knox couldn't help but get excited. He now wanted to use these items to unlock hidden plots in the game. However, Rona was very confused about this, because these things were not only extremely expensive, but were also toxic or taboo medicines. Hearing such questions, Knox didn't answer directly. Instead, he took the Venom of Three-Headed Snake and swallowed it without hesitation. This action instantly shocked Rona, but when she tried to report to the butler, she was stopped by Knox at this moment. Knox's face had turned pale, the severe pain in his chest making him break out in cold sweat. Meanwhile, the system issued a prompt. You have taken the Venom of Three-Headed Snake. Stamina will temporarily increase to 1.5 times. 10-minute death countdown has begun. Seeing this, Knox took up the Golem's Nucleus and began chewing it vigorously. And, at this moment, the hidden plot was successfully triggered. It turned out that the Golem's Nucleus could petrify human bodies to enhance defense, but when taken together with the Venom of Three-Headed Snake, it would activate a special effect. Now the weakening curse on Knox had completely disappeared. The toxins in his body were also gradually diluting, and next, Knox was preparing to unlock other hidden plots. Then he unbuttoned his clothes in front of Rona. This made the originally panicked Rona instantly blush red. However, Knox just took the Reminder Fairy's Springwater and poured it all over himself. Instantly, the Golem's Nucleus's petrification effect was lifted, and new hidden plot was triggered. The user will temporarily be granted the Growth Blessing trait. Growth speed will be doubled until reaching 5 points of stamina. Then Knox directly tore open the Scroll of Rapid Stamina Growth. His growth speed doubled again. Now he had successfully escaped the weakening curse through hidden plots, and even offset the stamina growth rate limit of terminal illness. And at this moment, Rona directly tackled him to the ground. Then with a choked voice, she hurriedly checked his physical condition. When I saw you suddenly take off your clothes, I thought your mind had gone wrong from the poison. And looking at Rona's worried face, Knox couldn't help but sigh that although this person spread rumors about him everywhere, her heart was actually very kind. Then he smiled and comforted Rona that he was fine. A moment later, Knox started running training again, while Thalia, observing in secret, was puzzled. Why would such a frail person agree to duel with his 2 brothers? Hearing this, the maid beside her told her to mind her words. After all, belittling the youngest son of the Lienhaber family was an act against etiquette. However, Thalia felt she wasn't wrong, in her view. Knox's swordsmanship was simply awful, but he had unhesitatingly refused other family retainers' goodwill to teach him swordsmanship. Could running alone defeat his brothers? She dared to bet he would end up being beaten one-sidedly in the duel, however. Even though she had such a low opinion of Knox, her heart couldn't help but be concerned. Finally, driven by curiosity, she came before Knox and decided to ask him clearly, then enthusiastically greeted him and introduced her name. Hearing this, Knox appeared very calm on the surface, but was actually extremely flustered. Wondering what this person wanted, then he pretended to be composed and asked what she wanted, while Thalia, seeing Knox so cold, she actually began to analyze internally. Believing that Knox must be speechless from being stunned by her beauty, then Thalia went straight to the point. Do you really think you can win the duel just by running? If you have any difficulties, you can ask me for help. Hearing this, Knox rejected her without hesitation. He even coldly told Thalia to stay away from him in the future, then turned to leave. This unreasonable behavior instantly made Thalia's face flush red with anger. Her goodwill was met with harsh words. Then she caught up with Knox's steps and deliberately bumped into him. Seeing this, Rona couldn't help but sigh that the young master was still the same stubborn young master as before. And looking at Thalia's gradually disappearing figure, Nox only felt things had become worse. Then he used insight to check Thalia's status window. Ordinary characters usually only have 4 points of stamina, but Thalia's initial attributes were unusually high. Although her potential wasn't as good as the continent's 3 sword emperors and 4 sages, but she also possessed talent just below them. Just this point alone would let her easily defeat powerful demons. Not only that, but her fire attribute magic would also evolve into white flame in the future. Indeed, no matter how many times he saw it, he still felt her talent was truly heaven-defying. But even knowing the truth, Nox couldn't casually recruit Thalia, as this would change the original story plot. He had to find a way to follow history while avoiding his own death, moreover. Trying to be friendly with someone who would kill him was unrealistic to begin with. Meanwhile, Thalia was still concerned about Nox's behavior. Since childhood, she had been the genius admired by everyone in her family. However, she had never defeated her elder sister. Because of this, her heart was always full of inferiority. She even doubted whether her dream of becoming a knight could be realized, since ancient times. Knights have been beings who are not content with personal desires and sometimes willing to sacrifice themselves for justice. Besides having this mindset, one must also go through countless trials of sword and form. But now Nox wanted to defeat brothers who had trained for years just by running. She firmly believed Nox would definitely lose in this match. Time quickly arrived at the day of the decisive battle. All family members gathered at the training ground. At this moment, the family head interestingly asked the head butler what he thought about this match. Rodway believed the victor would be young Master Alan. Hearing this, the family head seemed thoughtful. Perhaps your guess is what would be normal, however. These words made Rodway feel very puzzled, because he had once followed the family head's path of knighthood. He knew deeply that sword skill proficiency depended on training time and depth of research, and those who could successfully overturn and surpass their predecessors were only those chosen ones with extraordinary talent. Could young Master Nox really possess such innate talent? And at this moment, the family head suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Nox wasn't completely without chance of victory. At least he inherited the Lienhaber family's traditional bloodline. Meanwhile, Nox on the training ground appeared very worried, because his sword genius trait was still in an unactivated state. Although he had trained desperately during this period, his stamina value stopped at 3.8 before the decisive battle. Even Rona, who ran with him, had 4.5 stamina. This made Nox feel very frustrated. As the game's biggest villain, he couldn't even match a background maid. Could his luck value be negative? At this moment, seeing Nox's unconfident expression, Alan started mocking again. I advise you to give up early. Even though you're the family's shame, you're still my brother. I don't want to make you look too miserable. Hearing these words, Nox could only pretend to be calm. He knew that if he failed here, not only would he not find his lost memories, but he also wouldn't be able to find out who the mysterious letter writer was. And now Alan's stamina value was as high as 8 points, which meant he couldn't win through conventional means. As the referee announced the duel's official start, Alan took the initiative and launched his attack first, facing the sword swinging down. Nox could only dodge stumblingly, but Alan didn't easily stop his movements. He swung his weapon frantically at Nox. Under the fierce offensive, Nox could only focus on defense. As Alan swung another sword, Nox was instantly knocked down. However, he showed a smug smile, because, while being hit, he was actually increasing his stamina value. Seeing Nox being completely suppressed, the family head couldn't help but frown. I had some expectations for his performance, but is this his limit? He was about to tell Rodway to end this match. However, at this moment, Nox's sword genius trait was successfully activated. A terrifying aura instantly burst forth. At this moment, everything in his eyes seemed to slow down several times. So this was the world that geniuses lived in. But although Alan's movements looked slow, this had nothing to do with whether he could take action quickly. Moreover, the genius time skill could only last for 5 minutes at most, so he had to defeat both brothers within the limited time. However, now that the sword genius trait had been successfully activated, the final result was already settled down, only to see Nox knock Alan's weapon flying with a casual movement, then raised a confident smile and taunted, I've been holding back all along, but fighting like this is too boring, so why don't you both come at once? After speaking, he requested his father to let him fight with both brothers simultaneously. Hearing this, the twin brothers were instantly stunned. What gave this arrogant fellow such confidence? However, the family head not only wasn't angry but smiled instead, because he could clearly feel that Nox's aura had changed. At least now there was value in continuing to observe. Then he approved Nox's request. This operation completely humiliated the twin brothers. They angrily raised their weapons and launched fierce attacks at Nox. However, Nox could always handle it with ease. Meanwhile, System prompts appeared before his eyes again. Due to the special effect of Genius Time, the proficiency of Dark Family's low-level swordsmanship will be improved. At this point, he could easily see through the twin brothers' swordsmanship routines. No attacks could harm Nox at all. He could even counterattack under their fierce offensive. At this moment, the air seemed to freeze. Nox's strength had already made the twin brothers feel fearful. Everyone couldn't understand why the former family waste now had the power to fight two people. And just as the twin brothers were stunned, Nox's figure appeared before them again, then swung his weapon and suppressed them without any chance to fight back. At this moment, although the match result was important for Nox, he now felt that swinging a sword was a pleasurable thing. With Nox's final strike, this duel with Elydine Academy's admission ticket, as the stake ended with the twin brothers' defeat. And the referee immediately announced that victory belonged to Nox. Seeing this scene, Thalia was instantly shocked. In the past month, she had never seen Nox learn swordsmanship. But now he used that broken body to defeat two strong opponents. Could it be that he awakened some heaven-defying talent? Thinking this, Thalia immediately decided to get to the bottom of this. Meanwhile, Nox exchanged smiles with his father before turning to leave, because the overuse of the Genius Time skill had already caused him backlash, and permanently taken away 2.5 days of his life. This made his already short-lived body even worse. Just now at the training ground, he had also endured the severe burden on his body. Only this way did he not expose himself in front of all family members. And at this time, Thalia suddenly appeared behind him, asking about his injuries with slightly nervous words, however. Nox didn't care about these things now. If father knew about the skill backlash, it would be terrible. But just as he was about to tell her not to mind other people's business, Thalia's face showed a shy blush, then incoherently expressed her apology to Nox. It turned out that when she saw Nox's fragile appearance of hiding his injuries alone, she dismissed what she had thought. Nox wasn't the stubborn young master as rumored. He had only gained victory through various efforts, yet she had previously ignored all his efforts. Thinking of this, Thalia couldn't help feeling somewhat ashamed, and at this moment, the already weakened Nox coughed up blood again. This made Thalia very worried, quickly stepping forward to check his injuries, but her kind gesture was mercilessly rejected. Only to see Nox warn Thalia coldly not to touch him, but actually, in the world where Nox lived before, he had always stayed at home, so this made it difficult for him to get along well with strangers. And seeing Nox still being cold towards her, Thalia apologized to him again. Hearing this, Nox was instantly stunned. What was up with her reaction? Even though her setting was a character with the Knight's Way trait, but as a child of a noble duke's family, it should be very difficult to apologize in front of others, right? Thinking of this, Nox asked her in a calm tone to keep his blood-coughing incident secret. Hearing this, Thalia agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, Theodore was very satisfied with Nox's performance today. Although he didn't understand why Nox endured attacks at the beginning, but his strength had undoubtedly surpassed his other 4 brothers, and he seemed to have deliberately hidden part of his talent. Then Theodore ordered Rodway to continue monitoring secretly, but not to interfere with whatever Nox did. Could my youngest son possibly have the talent worthy of inheriting the tyrannical dark sword? After all, I don't have much time left either, and at this moment, Nox was complaining about the system not being considerate enough. It turned out that he had completed the game's tutorial, so he received 3 free ability value allocation tickets as rewards. But if he could have gotten them earlier, he could have increased his stamina to 4 points just by lying down. And now that the Sword Genius trait had been unlocked, so he used all the allocation tickets on luck value. After all, luck value couldn't be improved through effort, so this decision was undoubtedly the best choice. Meanwhile, the system issued another prompt. The bonus reward for completing the game 27 times has been issued. Congratulations on receiving a random trait draw ticket and a one-time skill designation ticket. Then Nox summoned the random trait draw machine. When luck value reaches maximum, the probability of getting intermediate or above traits is 95%. As the trait machine began to spin, a radiant golden light gradually entered Nox's sight. Looking closely, this was actually a high-level trait scroll. He hurriedly opened it to check the effects of this trait. Active skill, Tyrant's Pressure. Can reduce all ability values by 20% for people whose comprehensive level is lower than oneself. Seeing this, Nox excitedly exclaimed that this was truly a conscientious game, and for the one-time skill designation ticket. He had already made up his mind, in order to obtain one of the hidden plots in the Leonuber family, that god-level skill was indispensable. He thought that father would soon gather the other brothers in the family. That's when this reward would make its appearance. Speaking of which, the second elder brother Grind should also be on his way home. After all, Elydine Academy's graduation ceremony had already ended. Thinking of this, Nox couldn't help but feel quite headache. A series of tasks left him with no spare time, but fortunately he wouldn't. have to pay attention to Thalia anymore. With her character setting, she shouldn't do anything to expose him, and she had no reason to approach him either. However, the next day Nox took back his guess from last night, only to see Thalia had already been waiting on Nox's regular path for his arrival, and righteously asked him to teach her the method of becoming strong quickly. Hearing this, Nox sighed repeatedly, appearing very helpless. In the plot he knew, Thalia very much wanted to gain her elder sister's recognition, which was why she was so persistent about becoming stronger. Then Nox told her to think about what kind of talent she possessed before training. Don't always compare yourself with others. Combine your own experience and then find the right medicine to achieve twice the result with half the effort. After speaking, he quickly left the place. Even though Thalia showed a pitiful appearance, he remained unmoved. A moment later, Nox received his father's summoned command, coming to the continent's top 3 horse breeding grounds, which was also the Lienhuber family's exclusive stable. And here, Nox and the twin brothers were to choose their lifelong war horses. Hearing this, Nox was extremely excited, because next would be the hidden plot he had been expecting. It turned out that in this game, horses were viewed as the most important animals. If someone decided to become a knight or mage, they must choose their own companion in childhood. And Elydian Academy also had horsemanship courses, and there would even be many army battles in the latter half of the game. Once a horse dies, it would take a lot of time to train again, and space movement magic was especially expensive. So horses became the most important means of movement across the entire continent. Since Nox had achieved victory in practice, Theodore gave him priority in choosing. As Nox carefully examined the fine horses in the stable, Theodore instantly showed an expectant expression. However, at this moment, Nox walked steadily towards a weak horse. Then, in the shocked gazes of the twin brothers, unhesitatingly chose it as his lifelong companion. Seeing this, Theodore couldn't help but frown, clearly very dissatisfied with Nox's decision. Then gave Nox another chance to choose again. However, Nox wasn't moved by this, because he knew this horse's race originated from Obsidian, which meant it was the most precious breed among all war horses. And according to cultivation conditions, it could even be raised to special grade level. However, due to negative traits, this horse now only had 2.5 days to live. But Nox already had a way to save it in his mind. Then he looked firmly at his father, expressing that he would never regret today's choice. Hearing this, Theodore couldn't help but fall into thought. He didn't understand why Nox was so persistent. Could it be that he saw his own reflection in the weak horse? Thinking of this, Theodore only felt very disappointed. If he was really such an emotionally weak person, then the position of Lienhuber family head should be given to someone else. Then Theodore no longer stopped him, and turned away disappointedly, and Nox also named this warhorse that would accompany him for life as Carl. Soon 2.5 days passed in a flash. Although during this time Rona took meticulous care of it, still couldn't change the fact that Carl was about to die. However, for such a result, Nox also had a perfect plan, only to see him take out the rune scroll he had prepared. As he infused magic power into it, a magic array suddenly appeared from the ground. Seeing this scene, Rona felt extremely shocked, because in this empire, except for royal family members, anyone who hadn't reached the specified age was forbidden to use magic power. If Nox's current behavior was reported, it would cause huge trouble. However, Nox didn't care about this. What he needed to do was concentrate on controlling his magic power. After all, his magic sensing genius trait hadn't awakened now, so even the slightest distraction could lead to complete failure. Now he could deeply feel the weak energy under his palm, and next he was going to use the one-time skill designation ticket he received before. It turns out that the skill he exchanged is called Book of Death. This black magic could resurrect Carl as an undead being. In the game, undead beings usually relied on black magic and dark magic power to resurrect. After getting their new identity, they would become stronger, and all possessed independent thinking ability, and would only blindly be loyal to their master. But throughout the continent, only the Marbase family could resurrect corpses into undead beings. Although both dark houses, the Lienhuber family mainly relied on knights as their main force, while the Malbas family mainly focused on controlling undead beings. So normally speaking, Nox didn't possess the ability to use black magic. However, he obtained the King's Book through the one-time skill designation ticket given by the system. At this moment, Nox poured out all his magic power. Suddenly, countless dark tentacles appeared on the ground, frantically grabbing at Carl. But the huge consumption also made Nox somewhat unable to support. The next second, he could no longer endure and directly spat black blood. At this moment, he was already magic depleted and could no longer continue infusing. However, at this time, an earth-shattering neigh sounded, only to see Carl standing there majestic like a hell warhorse. As the system prompted skill activation successful, player's pet Carl has been resurrected as an undead being. Seeing this scene, Nox let out a long sigh of relief and was extremely excited. He hurriedly stepped forward to check Carl's attribute panel. The negative trait of predetermined death had been deleted, and the pet's growth rate would increase 1.5 times for 1 year. Not only that, Nox could also summon Carl anytime through magic power. Suddenly, Rona rushed forward and hugged both Carl and Nox, tears streaming down like a waterfall, unstoppable. Nox's unauthorized use of magic worried her deeply. While she was overjoyed at Carl's rebirth, however, Carl found her overexcited behavior quite irritating and showed his impatience. Seeing this, Rona angrily scolded Carl for being ungrateful, telling him to spit out all the carrots she had fed him. Watching Rona's amusing behavior, Nox also felt very happy. Now it was time to search for other hidden plot elements. Soon, the time came for Nox's plan of action. Under the cover of night, he quietly made his way to the Lost Forest, the forbidden ground of the Lionhaber family. Here one could obtain the key to alleviating a terminal illness. However, great benefits always come with dangers. As the interior of the Lost Forest was shrouded in darkness and mist, even the most skilled pathfinder would find it difficult not to get lost. If Nox failed to complete the challenge, he would perish here. Though from a gaming strategy perspective, this forest held other significance, because adults cannot obtain any divine artifacts from defeating magical beasts, and the difficulty increases with age. Nox had once spent 6 consecutive nights finding a suitable strategy that met the conditions. If the maximum difficulty was 5 stars, the Lost Forest would occupy at least 2.5. After repeatedly checking the map to confirm he hadn't gone wrong, he prepared to enter. However, at that moment, he keenly sensed some slight movement in the bushes behind him, but when he turned to look, nothing had happened. Was he being too sensitive? Still, being cautious wasn't necessarily a bad thing, especially in the deadly Lost Forest. Then Nox lit a torch and carefully observed which way the smoke was drifting. Because the key to conquering this place lay in the opposite direction of the smoke, just following that path would ensure he wouldn't get lost. But suddenly Nox's expression changed drastically as he prepared to draw the sword at his waist, saying, "How long do you plan to hide?" However, only the trembling sounds of insects and wind responded. Nox sighed helplessly, remarking on how stubborn this person was, saying, "If that's how you want it, don't blame me for being ruthless." Then he held his sword and directly slashed at the bushes behind him, and hiding there was none other than Thalia in her nightgown. Seeing this, Nox was very surprised, and hurriedly asked why she was here. However, before hearing an answer, Nox immediately pulled Thalia to his side, because right in front of them was a gray wolf staring at them hungrily. Seeing this, Thalia instantly panicked. When she had sneaked out, she only brought a dagger. It would be difficult to fight against such a swift and powerful magical beast. At this moment, the gray wolf howled and pounced fiercely toward the two. However, Nox showed a mocking expression without any fear. In an instant, before the gray wolf could get close, its chest was already slashed by his sword. Seeing how the fierce magical beast fell before her without any resistance, Thalia couldn't help but marvel at how clean and swift Nox's swordplay was. At this time, Nox asked Thalia again with a serious expression why she had come here. Hearing this, Thalia nervously said she was just out for a walk, but her uneasy demeanor clearly wasn't enough to convince anyone. Nox calmly picked up the dropped torch. "If you won't tell the truth, I'll leave you here," he said. Hearing these words, Thalia immediately became anxious. She quickly grabbed Nox's arm, then revealed her true intentions completely. It turned out she thought Nox's rapid progress must have involved some special training method. By chance, she had seen Nox leave late at night from his room, so she secretly followed him to the Lost Forest. Hearing this, Nox found it both amusing and exasperating, though he hadn't expected Thalia to think so highly of him, considering she was one of the crucial characters in this game. Nox sighed helplessly, and had no choice but to let her follow behind him. But just then, countless vicious figures suddenly emerged from not far away. In the torchlight, a pack of gray wolves had surrounded them. Seeing this situation, Thalia became terrified, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. However, Nox handed the torch to her and prepared to fight alone. Although an unpredictable variable had appeared, as long as he could refocus, he should be able to defeat this pack of wolves. After all, this was the prologue area before the main plot begins, so there wouldn't be any boss-level magical beasts. Though creatures of a higher rank than gray wolves might possibly appear, at this moment, the wolf pack howled and charged frantically at Nox with his superior swordplay. He quickly eliminated the attacking magical beasts. Seeing this, Thalia was shocked by this display of prowess. She could sense that Nox hadn't even shown his full strength after all. His swordsmanship when fighting his two brothers was even more impressive. But thinking of how Nox had told her to stay back earlier, she felt somewhat dejected. Perhaps in Nox's eyes her abilities were still far too lacking. And just then, a wolf's howl echoed through the Lost Forest. Nox looked ahead with a grave expression, wondering if that one was finally going to appear. The next second, an elite gray wolf with fierce gleaming eyes appeared before them. Meanwhile, Maid Emma discovered that Lady Thalia was not in her room. A bad premonition instantly swept over her. She hurriedly called on butler Rodway to investigate Thalia's whereabouts. Judging from the different-sized footprints on the ground, they could confirm that Nox and Thalia had entered the Lost Forest. Hearing this news, Emma collapsed to the ground, because the Lost Forest was one of the greatest shames of the Linehaber family. Although they were the most powerful dark family in the south, they had been unable to conquer this forest by any means. Rodway was also puzzled why Nox would enter it, as the family's magical barrier showed no signs of being penetrated. This meant Nox had entered the forest intentionally. Thinking of this, Rodway's opinion of Nox had greatly improved. The young master was truly no longer that weak and incompetent spoiled child, and now the only way to get Thalia out safely was for Nox to use his wisdom to find the correct path through the forest. Meanwhile, Nox repeatedly reminded Thalia to conserve her strength. If attacked by the wolf pack, she should immediately run away, as this would increase her chances of survival. But Nox's real intention was just hoping Thalia would stay alert. If he focused entirely on fighting the elite wolf, he might be vulnerable to sneak attacks. So Thalia's role was to be Nox's backup. Then Nox wasted no more time and directly activated his genius time skill. However, seeing this, the elite wolf showed a mocking expression, then walked to the side and leisurely started taking a nap. Such arrogant behavior instantly enraged Nox. Was this damned beast looking down on him? At this moment, the ordinary wolf pack launched their attack. Under the enhancement of his skill, Nox's sword movements became even more precise. The charging wolves were all cut down by his blade without exception. But just then, a wolf suddenly attacked from behind him. By the time Nox realized it, it was already too late. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Thalia threw her dagger, directly piercing the wolf's throat. This saved Nox from being bitten and escaping this crisis. And now Thalia's situation was also very dangerous. Several wolves were baring their fangs at her beneath the tree. But what worried her most was whether Nox was injured. This made Nox very surprised. The white flame goddess who had once personally executed him was now helping him. Had the game's original plot already started changing quietly? Just as he was pondering this, the elite wolf also began to move, however. Nox was now suffering from skill backlash. His hands holding the precious sword were trembling involuntarily. A moment of carelessness led to him being heavily wounded by the lightning-fast elite wolf. That lightning-like speed made Nox feel very troubled. Moreover, it was skilled at using terrain to achieve surprising victories. Thinking about how he had earlier exaggerated by rating the Lost Forest as only 2.5 stars, it seemed that assessment needed to be corrected now. The elite wolf was more cunning than in the game. And just then, the wolf suddenly flashed from his side. But when Nox raised his sword to strike, the wolf suddenly stopped short, making Nox's attack miss. Then showing a triumphant look, it attacked again. At this moment, Nox finally understood the wolf was waiting for the chance when he would be stiff after swinging his sword. Watching himself about to become the beast's meal, Nox was helpless, as the skill backlash had made him somewhat dizzy, with blood involuntarily flowing from his mouth. He had never imagined such a situation would occur. Was it because he had completed this game 27 times and had arrogantly thought he could do anything? Thinking this, he unwillingly waited for death to come. However, a scream rang out, and Nox suddenly opened his eyes to see a dagger stab directly into the wolf's skull. Seizing this opportunity, he quickly raised his sword, using all his strength to pierce the wolf's most vulnerable belly. With a painful howl, Nox collapsed powerlessly to the ground, while the wolf also fell into a pool of blood, its body completely pierced. Seeing this, Thalia's eyes were full of worry. She anxiously asked about Nox's injuries, while Nox also expressed thanks for her timely help. But suddenly he paused. Am I thanking an enemy who will take my life in the future? Thinking this, he returned to his former cold attitude. Then Nox collected the target item from this trip, and now all that remained was to exit the forest to complete the mission. Meanwhile, Emma and Rodway were both full of worry, because the Lost Forest had never been conquered, causing residents in their territory to frequently go missing. So people secretly criticized the Linehaber family's incompetence, and now Thalia's disappearance might further fuel this issue. But just then, the forest's mist began to gradually disperse. Everyone showed expressions of disbelief, as the only possibility they could think of was becoming reality. A moment later, Nox and Thalia slowly walked out of the forest. Seeing this, Rodway almost lost control of his expression management. He was certain that the succession of the Linehaber family would see some upheaval. At this time, Nox returned to his room exhaustedly. He hadn't expected Rodway and the family knights to be waiting there, but fortunately, he had successfully obtained the Black Flame Ring. When worn, it could increase 1 point of vitality and magic power. Its effect was to take the life force of killed targets for oneself, although this alone couldn't overcome the negative trait of terminal illness. But struggling to take steps forward was better than waiting hopelessly for death. Soon, 6 months passed in the blink of an eye. As the greatest contributor to conquering the Lost Forest, Nox not only didn't receive due rewards, he was even forbidden by his father to go out. This also meant his remaining lifespan was only 147 days. Realizing he couldn't continue like this, Nox prepared to seek his father to lift the confinement order. Meanwhile, Family head Theodore was worried about the heir matter, recalling that night of slaughter from the past. He had single-handedly fought against tens of thousands of demon waves. To prevent such things from happening to mankind again, he must quickly choose one among his 5 sons to inherit the tyrant Black Sword. After all, the final chosen one would be the one to take his life. Regarding Nox's conquest of the Lost Forest, he should have given rewards. Only because the family retainers strongly opposed was it delayed until now. They didn't believe the formerly wayward Nox had truly changed, so Theodore sent people to thoroughly investigate the Lost Forest. Now with facts before them, as family head he should be fair with rewards and punishments. At this time Nox came to his location. After a simple greeting, they got straight to the main topic. Regarding the Lost Forest incident, Theodore said he would fulfill any one request. Hearing this, Nox was instantly stunned. Even after replaying this game 27 times, this was the first time he had seen Theodore offer such a reward. Wasn't he supposed to be an authoritarian character who never smiled? Thinking this, Nox couldn't help but wonder if Theodore had been kicked in the head by a donkey. Then he reconfirmed the earlier reward. Would any request be granted? Hearing this, Theodore directly stood up. I swear by my name as head of the Lienhaber family and the long history of the tyrant Black Sword, I will grant any request you make, with no restrictions on content. But if your request is especially excessive, my evaluation of you will change. Seeing his father's serious expression, Nox said no more, then indicated he needed some time to consider. Besides this, he could also freely go out starting today. Now less than 2 months remained until the Elydine Academy opened. As the Empire's highest institution of learning, talented students from all over the country would flock there, and Nox not only had to establish himself there, but also needed to enter the main plot to find companions. For this, he must quickly improve his ability values in this time. However, just then, Rodway brought unexpected news. This apprentice maid would be going to Elydine Academy together with Nox. When he heard her name, Nox's expression suddenly became grave. He used his insight ability to check Zatiri's status window. Besides the passive skill of perfect housework ability, she was currently following family head Theodore's orders to monitor Nox. As one of the strongest antagonists in this game, Theodore hadn't become family head through sword skills, but rather through eyes that doubted everything around him. As night fell, Nox lay in bed deep in thought. What was his father's intention in having Zatiri monitor him? Although Zatiri wasn't related to the game's main plot, it would be a bit of a waste to simply abandon her, because according to the correct plot progression, Zatiri should have become the new head of the Lobelia family. But her parents were killed by her uncle who stole the inheritance rights. Then she fled her family and came to the Lienhabers as a maid. Unfortunately, in the end, she couldn't bear the pain. Choosing the extreme method of ending her own life, Nox was also very troubled about such talented people. If he personally saved a character who was supposed to die and caused variables in the plot, what kind of butterfly effect would that produce? The next day he had 2 maids follow him to hunt magical beasts. Because he needed to rely on the newly acquired Black Flame Ring to extend his lifespan, the Lost Forest had now become an ordinary forest. Nox could effortlessly slay these grey wolves, however. Even after working hard to eliminate all the magical beasts in the vicinity, he only earned 2.5 hours of lifespan. And what truly troubled him was the limited number of magical beasts here. After several days of continuous hunting, the magical beasts in the Lost Forest were nearly extinct. This brought his grand life extension plan to a crisis of failure. However, just as they were preparing to head back, Nox asked Rona to return first and prepare dinner. Because he needed to understand Zatiri's thoughts to make his next plans. After all, the trait of assisting geniuses would be very helpful for his future. But no matter how beautiful and sharp a sword is, there's no point in keeping it if it can't be used. Then he seriously asked Zatiri, "Who do you truly serve?" Hearing this, Zatiri was instantly stunned. She hadn't expected Nox to raise such a thorny question. After half a moment of silence, she still gave no explanation. Seeing this, Nox also understood her thoughts. "So this is your answer, but you can rest assured I won't investigate this matter deeply. No matter who you serve, I will treat you as one of my own. If you need to, you can also use me." After speaking, Nox lowered his head and brushed past her. Looking at Nox's retreating figure, Zatiri felt extremely conflicted. She didn't know which path she should take to be correct. Soon after, a groundless rumor spread widely within the mansion. The content was that Zatiri's father had been framed with charges of intending to betray the family, and Zatiri as a direct relative was permanently exiled from the family, so she now had no right to remain at the Lienhabers as a maid. Meanwhile, Zatiri was hiding in a corner, dejected. As a commoner, she could no longer continue to assist Nox. She wanted to say goodbye to the other maids before departing, but unexpectedly, her friendly smile was met with contemptuous looks. However, just then, Rona appeared anxiously behind her without explanation. She pulled her along to find Nox, and at this moment, Nox was also in a state of confusion. Although he knew the charges against Zatiri's father were fabricated, but if he saved a character destined to die, then the plot's direction would change because of this. At that time, who knows what kind of butterfly effect it would bring him, so he could only stand by and watch. A moment later, Nox continued to hunt magical beasts in the Lost Forest. However, beneath his exquisite swordsmanship lay hints of savage emotions, as if angry at being unable to save Zetiri. The two watching beside him also noticed Nox's abnormality. This made Zetiri's heart slightly uneasy. At this moment, Nox was waiting for that one to appear. It turns out that in the Lost Forest, a hidden boss would appear once the magical beast numbers were reduced below 20%. However, just when Nox thought the boss wouldn't appear today either, a sharp spike shot toward him like a bullet. Fortunately, he reacted in time to dodge this dangerous attack by sidestepping. That terrifying speed made Nox excited. The next second, a giant Wasp King appeared before his eyes. But just when Nox was preparing to battle the Wasp King, Zetiri recklessly blocked in front of him. The poison stinger pierced into her body without resistance. Seeing this, Nox was instantly stunned. Even without Zetiri's help, he could have blocked this attack. But why did she save him? In that instant, anger overtook Nox's rationality. He immediately activated his genius time skill, and with one strike cut down the powerful Wasp King. At this moment, Zetiri's consciousness was gradually becoming blurry. But she sensed anxiety in Nox's voice. Is this the expression someone would show if they were just using me? Meanwhile, Theodore also learned about Zetiri's exile. Originally, he had brought Zetiri back to annex the Lobelia family. Once the timing was right, the Lienhaber family could use any means to make them submit. But now Zetiri had no more value to be used. So he asked Rodway how to handle this matter. Although Zetiri's abilities were outstanding, if they let a maid without family status serve young Master Nox, then Nox might be looked down upon at the Elidine Academy, so Rodway thought it would be better for the Lienhaber family to quietly dispose of her. Hearing this, Theodore nodded in agreement. However, just then, a servant suddenly pushed open the door with a nervous expression. It turned out that 2.5 minutes ago, Nox had brought the injured and unconscious Zetiri back to the mansion for treatment. However, the Wasp King's poison could only be neutralized by Mandrake, but this medicine couldn't be used without permission from the family head or Rodway. Hearing this, Nox's face instantly darkened. Is Rodway's position in this family higher than mine? Go ahead with the treatment. I'll explain to Father afterwards. Hearing these words, the doctor didn't dare disobey and hurriedly took out Mandrake to give to Zetiri. Seeing she was out of life danger, Nox turned to go find his father. A moment later, Nox came to the family head's room. How rare. You came to find me without notice. Is it because of that maid's matter? Hearing this, Nox immediately activated his acting genius trait. You said earlier you would fulfill any wish of mine. Now I have considered it, please. Give me Zetiri, who has already been expelled from her family. For the current Nox, he no longer cared about butterfly effects impacting the main plot, because when Zetiri recklessly blocked in front of him, Nox had already understood the answer. She didn't speak that day. And at this time, Theodore also agreed to Nox's request. Meanwhile, Zetiri had awakened from her unconsciousness. Seeing this, Rona hurriedly rushed out to find Nox. However, just after Rona left, Zetiri quietly began packing her luggage. But just as she was preparing to leave silently, Nox blocked her path. As my maid, where do you plan to go without staying by my side to assist me? Hearing this, Zetiri could no longer control her emotions. You already knew, didn't you? I was monitoring you on the family head's orders, so why do you still want to keep me? Looking at Zetiri revealing her most genuine emotions, Nox couldn't help but laugh lightly. Indeed, she looked more lively this way. The relationship between people is naturally one of deceiving and being deceived. After doing something to wrong me, you want to leave without any compensation. How could I possibly let you go so easily? Though I don't know what father is thinking. I don't need you to have the Lobelia surname. I only need your abilities, nothing more. So from now on, you must stay here as a maid to atone. Hearing these words, Zetiri's heart was also somewhat moved. Although she had been designated as the sole heir in her family, she had never been treated with such sincerity. At this moment, emotions welled up beyond words. Instead of forcing a smile like before, she showed a long-absent genuine smile and turned to say, I will stay by your side and assist you forever. Several days later, Grein, the second son of the Lienhaber family, successfully returned after graduating from Elidine Academy. For this, family head Theodore specially held a banquet to welcome him home. Grein was one of Nox's many older brothers. He was an extremely shallow and lecherous person, and his true nature hadn't been exposed. Also because the former Nox was even more dissolute. Because he was skilled at dealing with people and power schemes, he was able to successfully graduate from Elidine Academy, which had less than a 50% graduation rate. At this time, Theodore asked Grein when he planned to go to Chaders. Hearing this, Nox's interest was instantly ignited. Because Chaders was an undeveloped neutral territory in the south, once winter came, it would lead to magical beasts running rampant. This made the already impoverished Shaders even worse off, and Grind had received a mission from the royal family to go there to stop the beast tide. After all, to become a knight recognized by the royal family, one must endure such trials. This was also an unchanging rule of the Akahine Empire. Nox understood this mission wasn't simply hunting magical beasts, it also involved several complex plot entanglements. So he could obtain many useful things from Chader's storyline. Therefore, for his benefit, he must personally participate in this subjugation battle. Learning that Grind would depart in 3 days, Nox immediately proposed to follow his brother. Hearing this, Grind and Theodore instantly showed surprised expressions. Do you know what kind of place Chader's is? For such questions Nox knew all too well in his heart. I heard it's a neutral territory that occasionally gets raided by magical beasts, and there are quite a few thieves operating in secret, intending to increase their power and expand their scale. Seeing Nox answer fluently, Grind still didn't stop challenging him. He used his sharp perception trait to ask again, are the rumors true about you conquering the Lost Forest with a second daughter of the Stylene family, defeating the twin brothers and hiring a commoner woman as a maid? Nox heard this without panic. He knew Grind's trait could detect others' inner fluctuations. Then he activated Iron Will to counter his perception ability, and gave affirmative answers to those 3 questions. However, after hearing this, Grind still remained unmoved. Although you've indeed achieved many things recently, but you can't execute missions with me without entering Elydine Academy, because I don't want to personally collect your corpse. But just as his words fell, Theodore suddenly stood up. I can guarantee that won't happen. Grind, take your brother to Chader's. Hearing this, Grind still wanted to stop his father's decision, but was frozen in place by Theodore's unyielding gaze. After Theodore left, Nox also felt very puzzled about this. He allowed it so easily. Could he be planning something? And at this moment Grind was already red, faced with anger. He grabbed Nox's collar furiously and threatened, you'd better stay in your room these few days and not go anywhere. Wouldn't it be a shame to be seriously injured before the subjugation battle begins? Just then Zetairi deliberately spilled wine on Nox. This finally diffused the tense confrontation between them. Soon, news of Nox going to Chader's spread throughout the mansion, however. This was strongly opposed by Zetairi and Rona. After all, the magical beasts there were counted in tens of thousands. But how could Nox miss this excellent opportunity to extend his lifespan? Then he stated he would participate in this subjugation battle alone, so Rona and the others should stay at the mansion. However, Zetairi rejected this proposal without hesitation. As your exclusive maid, I have the duty to assist you by your side. Moreover, without me, how could you safely get through this long journey? Hearing this, Nox also felt she had a point. After all, he couldn't even handle the simplest laundry and cooking. And for Zetairi, this was perhaps an inevitable choice. If he happened to die in the subjugation battle, her position in the Lienhaber family would also become precarious. Thinking this, he agreed to let Zetairi go to Chader's together. In the evening, Rodway summoned Nox on the family head's orders. Reportedly, Theodore had something very important to pass on to him. A moment later, Nox arrived at the family head's room as agreed. Before his eyes was clearly placed a magic sword used by the first family head. The sudden appearance of such a precious item made Nox somewhat flustered. Although he couldn't figure out why Theodore would entrust it to him, he must obtain this powerful magic sword. Now, please tell me what test you plan to use it for. Hearing this, Theodore calmly told Nox to grip the sword handle. As Nox raised the magic sword, a powerful dark aura instantly burst forth, but soon Nox detected something unusual. It was continuously absorbing his magic power, and the sword's color also began to change. Seeing this situation, Theodore prepared to reveal the truth to Nox. It turned out this sword was named the Stormmaker. It would absorb its master's magic power and release it with several times the power, but as long as it killed creatures, it would absorb their magic power and convert it into one's own ability value. 9 out of 10 people would collapse the instant they gripped the handle. Even Theodore at his peak only lasted 1 hour. The first family head established the Lienhaber family using this very sword. If you want to obtain it, you must endure for more than 10 minutes. Meanwhile, Nox's internal magic power was almost depleted. The huge consumption meant he could no longer persist even for 1 minute, and the system's warning prompt also issued, player's internal magic power has been completely depleted, now forcibly replacing magic power using life force as medium. Instantly, the dark aura on the magic sword began turning crimson red, while Nox's lifespan rapidly decreased. Seeing this, Nox understood that even if this sword was a priceless treasure, he must give up now. However, he finally discovered that no matter how he struggled, the magic sword remained firmly attached to his palm as if glued there.